Good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I'm your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and today is episode 210, and we are going to take a quick look at the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration. I want to touch on this one just shortly because this one, they have quite a few employees, so I thought, well, being that it is such a large federal agency and have so many employees, it's probably good to go over this one because it does explain quite a few things. So in terms of the TSA, also known as Transportation Security Administration, they were formed November 19th in 2001, but they actually go further back than that because this is just a knee-jerk reaction to the 9/11 attacks, which I understand why. I just don't like how they operate their job responsibilities and how they implement those job responsibilities because I think they rough people up and they're not very nice to Americans. Their preceding agency was the Federal Aviation Administration Office of Civil Aviation Security. In terms of their budget, it is huge. It is ridiculous. It is $7.78 billion per year, and that is a whole lot of money. In terms of employees, they have 54,200 plus employees, and that's as of 2020, so they have way too many employees. And considering that they're not very nice, I think they could work on their budget just a little bit because I have yet to meet a nice or kind TSA agent. And it's one of those things that kind of reminds me of a dirty cop. You know, it's always nice to meet a police officer that is nice and kind because they understand that the majority of people, especially Americans, you know, the majority of the public are good, kind people. And that it's rare to have bad people. It just is. But here's the thing. TSA agents are just like these cops that don't have a really proper mindset because they don't have critical thinking skills, and so they tend to think that you're guilty until proven innocent when that actually breaks the law. The law actually is you're innocent until proven guilty. That's why you have investigations, and that's why you have profiling and things like that, because you want to make sure that you're going after the bad people and you're holding the bad people accountable and you're not bothering or harassing innocent people, which is exactly what sometimes the TSA does, which is not always a positive thing to do, right? Now, this agency does have quite a few agency executives, and I'm not a big fan of that because it costs the American taxpayer a lot of money. And so whenever you hear agency executive, more than likely, 9 times out of 10, these are salary positions, so these are not hourly, they are salaried, and so they are very expensive jobs for the American people to pay for. Some of them might be professional paper pushers, some might not. But I think they just are too large of a federal agency, and this is why their budget is so large. And they need to work on that, and it needs to be streamlined because I think they could definitely do a better job. Now, their parent agency is the Department of Homeland Security. I'm not a huge fan of the Department of Homeland Security. I understand why they're there. I understand what they do and why they do what they do. It's just I'm not always a big fan of it because of their behavior problems. It's one thing if a federal agency is super nice and super helpful and, if they need to go after a bad person, then they only go after the bad person. They don't target innocent people that just happen to be there. Like they don't go after bystanders. But sometimes these federal agencies get a little too big for their britches and they make mistakes, and the TSA has been very much known for that. Now, in terms of the requirements of employment to be a TSA agent, you have to be a United States citizen or a U.S. national at the time of your application. You have to be at least 18 years of age. You have to pass a drug screening and medical evaluation. You have to pass a background check, investigation, including a credit and criminal check. I am all for the criminal check, but I'm not for credit checks, and here's why. If someone has bad credit, that I've talked about this in times past, having bad credit is not a determining factor for someone's type of employment, and it's not a character flaw if someone has bad credit. Here's the thing. When someone has bad credit or if they have a lot of debt, they actually need a really good job to help repair their credit and also to pay off their debt. But if people with bad credit are never given the opportunity to make more money, then they stay forever in poverty, and that is wrong, and that is discriminatory. It's not right. So that's just my personal opinion, and I'm saying this as a Republican capitalist. Because I think if you truly want what is best for somebody else, you're not going to shame and blame them like that. You should want what is best for the other person, you should not want what is worse for them or what is bad for them. Now, there's another thing they have on here that I don't agree with. It says that in order to become a TSA agent, for employment, I should word it that way, you have to have no default on $7,500 or more in delinquent debt. And here's the thing, I think that's kind of ridiculous, because just think about, let's say if ever you got sick and had to go to the hospital. Can you just imagine how much your medical bill is? And let's say you've been trying to negotiate to try and pay that off. And here's the thing, medical debt, the sicker you get, the higher your debt is going to be if you can't pay it off. So, let's say you got really sick and you had to go to the hospital, and that was like a year or two ago, and you've been trying to pay it off, but the only way you can pay it off is to get a job and make more money. So here's the thing, your debt follows you. I mean, it follows you like a bad cold everywhere, right? It's not good. But here's the thing, if you have an employer, whether federal, state, or private sector, because both public sector and private sector think this way, unfortunately, they think that if you have debt, oh, you're a bad person and we don't want you to work for us. That's not right. Because, most people, when they have debt, it's typically not their fault. I very rarely meet people that just totally messed up their credit because of stupidity or they just want to overspend money. Most people I have met over the years, they have really bad debt or they have really bad credit scores because they've either been in a car wreck, got really sick, or they had to take care of a relative, or maybe they lost a job. Like it's some kind of, I would say, a catastrophic event or a life-changing event usually caused it. Are there people that are stupid? Sure. But not everyone that has bad credit is stupid. Just like not everybody that's stupid has bad credit. Like I've met some really stupid people over the years, God bless them, and some of them are extremely successful. I'm just kind of surprised. Luck of the draw, I don't know. But I think it's better to be kind to people than to throw something in their face and say, oh, we don't want you because of your bad credit. It's like, well, why aren't we helping people to have better credit scores? See, here's the thing. It's technically not a credit score. It's a debt score. And here's another thing. Just because someone has bad credit doesn't mean that what is on their credit score is accurate or correct. There is a lot of identity theft in this country. And sometimes there are really bad debt collectors that just make stuff up and put stuff on people's credit, or they link it to their social security number so that way they can try and make money off of people. And they just buy and sell this debt, and then the consumer doesn't really know what's going on with their credit or their social security number. Whose fault is that? It's not the consumer's fault. There's a lot of stuff that goes on that consumers don't know about, but yet it's the consumer that's left holding the bag, so to speak. So not all this stuff is their fault, on their credit report. And here's another thing. There are so many employers that they don't tell people what is on, their credit report, but yet they just tell them, oh, we're not going to employ you. Well, people need to know why they're not getting a job. Because if they're never really told the truth, then how can they get a better job? Like, how can they move up in social status or even income bracket? You know what I mean? Here in the United States, we have it really good where, if we want to make more money, we can make more money. But what's hindering people, at least from my experience, what's hindering people from making more money and having a better life is credit checks. And also, I would say not necessarily background checks, but like sometimes requiring at least 3 references. Here's the thing, people lose contact with people all the time. And here's another thing, there are some places I've interviewed for or interviewed with over the years that they think that if you haven't known someone for 20 years, then you're not a good person. I'm like, do you know, like I'm only in my 30s? And and sometimes like when these interviews have happened, I was in my 20s. It's like, so I was supposed to know this person from the moment I was born? Like, it's just, some of these stupid requirements that employers have, it's just like, be realistic about who the applicant actually is and that they actually just want to work for you and do a really good job. What's interesting is that, for the longest time, I did not understand why we have an unemployment rate and why sometimes it gets really bad. Because I was like, well, there's so many jobs here in the United States. Like, if someone wants a job, surely they can just go out and get one. No, it's not like that. It's not. It's very discriminatory and in ways that are not good, not appropriate, and it's very frustrating. And so, needless to say, just because someone doesn't have a job, that doesn't mean they're lazy. Because I know from personal experience, I've gone through dry spells before where I've been trying to find a job and it's just like pulling teeth. And I kind of feel like sometimes our market, it kind of bounces around between being a employee market or the employer market. Like who is it better for? Is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? That kind of thing. And I think that regardless of, what kind of market you have, you should just be kind and respectful to whoever is interviewing for a job that you have posted. And also, I think it's very hypocritical for an employer to demand a whole bunch of respect above and beyond what is already there when they themselves are not being very nice or agreeable to applicants or employees, because, it's a two-way street with the job. So, needless to say, with any job, you want to make sure that you are working for an employer that actually values you and your labor. Because if you're just working for someone that only values your labor, but they don't value you as a person, there's always going to be a problem. Always, always, always. And that's just how it is. It's not pleasant, but that's just how it is. Now, I will say this, in regards to TSA, I think they went a little overboard on COVID-19 in regards to implementing different things. Because I remember when I was at an airport, and there were TSA agents walking around the airport, and I guess I literally was at an airport. I was waiting to board my plane, and a new not a demand, but a new recommendation or requirement from the federal government just got released, literally, just in that moment. And so these TSA agents and also airline attendants, if you were for example, I'm making this up, but if you were at a American airline terminal, the flight attendants, who were not always very nice during COVID-19, they were requiring that you could not wear a cloth facial mask. And, what was really stupid about that was that a lot of medical masks or surgical masks were not available because, everybody had been buying them up. So here the federal government and airport security are making these demands that people wear a certain type of mask due to COVID-19, but yet they're not always available. So people are just trying to do what they can to be safe and agreeable, and this irritates some passengers. Now, me personally, I had a supply of masks on me that were not cloth. They were the ones that they were requesting, but these TSA agents and some of these flight attendants, they were not being very nice to passengers, because passengers are like, what? This just came down the pipeline? They're like, yes, we just got word. It has to be this type of mask. And I just kind of felt like that was overbearing, and it was ruining the positive experience of traveling. Because, traveling used to be fun, especially on airlines. It used to be such a joy. It's not so much of a joy anymore, and I think we need to go back to having fun. We can still have safety and security and those wonderful things, and they are wonderful things, and we should keep those things, but I think we need to do those things appropriately and do everything with kindness, because otherwise you're just being mean to a whole bunch of people that especially don't deserve it. So it is very much important, very much so. But in regards to what some of the TSA does, obviously they handle pat down screenings and things of that nature. It's just sometimes they get really aggressive, and I'm just not a big fan of that. I don't think anybody is. And then there's also a no-fly list. And so one thing I came across with that is that there is a news story. This came out a long time ago. I forget the kid's name, but there's this one kid. Somehow he ended up on the no-fly list, and his parents were like, what? Our kid got put on the no-fly list, so he can't fly anymore, at least until they remove his name from that list. And it's like, oh my gosh, they did that to a child? It's ridiculous. I think that is a bit extreme, because here's the thing. It wasn't a child that was a terrorist during 9/11. So I just think it's kind of ridiculous, some of the things that TSA is doing in regards to their policies and procedures, and they're just it's kind of just the strong arming of, or just the strong arm of the federal government, and it's just kind of bullying civilians. It's bullying citizens, and I don't think that's a very kind thing to do, because it wasn't American citizens that were terrorists. These men, they were from the Middle East. So, it's very important to recognize, okay, who is actually the enemy and who actually caused the problem. Otherwise, we're not really focusing in on what is very much important. in regards to those things. But needless to say, in regards to this agency, it's really large. I mean, they do a good job in terms of trying to track down bad people that are flying. I think they do a good job of that, for sure. But one thing I'm kind of surprised about TSA, and I'll close with this, is that, they don't really help us with not letting viruses or diseases into the country. TSA failed with COVID-19, and they also failed with Ebola, and there was another one that they failed on. I'm trying to remember what it was, but there was another one. See, here's the thing. We have several ports of entry into the United States, and it's not just airlines. There's also cruise lines, cruise ships, things of that nature. And here's the thing. It is part of TSA to help protect the public, especially in regards to chemical warfare and germ warfare. But here's the thing. The TSA agents at the airport, I kind of feel like, they're too busy shaming and blaming and being mean to just regular everyday passengers that they're not paying attention to the actual real threats that are taking place in our country or threats that are trying to get into our country. And I think that is a big problem. I just think whenever you have an agency that has really mean people and they're bullies, and also they have this kind of budget, over $7 billion a year, I think we need to pull the reins on this. I really think we do. What's interesting is that there is a call for abolishing the TSA. It says here, numerous groups and figures have called for the abolition of the TSA in its current form by persons and groups which include Senator Rand Paul, Representative John Micah, some of this might be outdated, the Cato Institute, Downsized DC Foundation, Freedom Works, an opinion columnist from Forbes, Fox News, National Review, USA Today, Vokes, the Washington Examiner, and the Washington Post. The TSA's critics frequently cite the agency as ineffective, invasive, incompetent, inexcusably costly, that is so true, on all four, as their reasons for seeking its abolition. Those seeking to abolish the TSA have cited the improved efficacy and cost of screening provided by qualified private companies in compliance with federal guidelines. I actually agree with that. You see, because here's the thing, it kind of reminds me of our public school systems, right? Public schools are funded obviously by our tax dollars, and right now in our public schools, they are doing everything they can, the Department of Education, which is a federal agency, they are doing everything they can to implement critical race theory. Now, is critical race theory appropriate, kind, genuine, even, normal or realistic or rational? No. Critical race theory is for shaming and blaming all white people for everybody else's problems. And that is not right, because we are not supposed to be critical of any race. There are good and bad people in every race. So critical race theory is not appropriate. But see, here's the thing. You have bureaucrats that think that critical race theory is great, and then you have bureaucrats that think that the TSA is great. But it's like, okay, they overspend our money, they don't want to be held accountable for what they do wrong, and they don't ever like being questioned. Well, that is a big problem, because whenever you have a federal agency, the only way that a federal agency is being manned or powered is by federal tax dollars. Federal tax dollars comes from the American people. And so whenever you have tax dollars that are going to the government, or even the state government, but especially the federal government, there is oversight on that. And there are audits, and there is accountability there. So being that, it is federal tax dollars, and they're tax dollars from citizens, because it's from our paychecks that's paying for this, there definitely should be accountability, and things should be, working correctly, not incorrectly. But unfortunately with federal agencies, they just spend and spend and spend and spend like nobody's business, whereas in the private sector, there is accountability and there is responsibility, and people are held to their jobs for that. So basically, say for example, you work as a security guard for a company in the private sector. Let's say the company sends you to a computer software company, and you are the head honcho security guard there at that facility. And yes, you work at that facility for a company, but technically, in terms of who pays your paycheck, you actually work for a security company. You just happen to be working on site at basically a contract. Well, here's the thing. You are held accountable for the work that you do and the work that you don't do. So here's the thing. TSA and these other federal agencies, they're not really held accountable for what they're doing or what they don't do or what they do wrong. But yet they get all this money. It's ridiculous. And it actually would be cheaper to have private sector companies do the security at our airports. And I guarantee you, if private sector companies handled the security at our airports, the employees would be way nicer. They would violate less people, and they would be a lot kinder, and there would be less thefts. Like I remember there was a really bad phase with the TSA where they were just stealing so many people's luggage. They were opening up their luggage and they were taking things from their luggage. Like their jewelry, their perfume, their cologne, anything they bought new on the trip. And it's just like, okay, thievery. But, it's very difficult to prove that with the TSA. It just is. So, and the reason why it's hard to prove that with the TSA, unfortunately, is because they act like they are above the law, and they are not above the law. They are supposed to implement the law and enforce the law. So here's the thing. I know I've said this in times past, but there are many jobs where, and the TSA is one of them, where sometimes people, they really love power and authority and they try and act like a cop when they are not a cop. Just because they are supposed to enforce federal law or state law, and they are part of law enforcement, that doesn't give them permission to be a police officer per se. Because there are different types of law enforcement. And here's the thing, a TSA agent, I can't ever see them laying their life on the line to protect a citizen at an airport. I could see a cop doing that, or a firefighter, or maybe a sheriff, but a TSA agent, my personal opinion of them, just from what I've seen, is that they could care less whether you live or die. And that's the problem. So basically, they have authority to enforce federal law, and they love doing that, but they're doing it in such a way that is authority driven, and they're not doing it because they love their country, they're doing it because they love the control and the power, and that is a big problem. It kind of reminds me of whenever, let's say you have a cop that gets fired from a small town. Well, all he does is go to a big city and he gets hired there. So basically it's like bros before hoes. It's like you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. So they keep hiring bad people. And so what sucks about that, we've talked about this in times past, is that the more an employer, whether in the public sector or private sector, employs bad people, the more the good people leave and they go work elsewhere. And so that's why there are many federal agencies that are so dysfunctional, especially in regards to their employees and how they behave, because you have bad people hiring and recruiting bad people to do the job. When actually we need really good people that care about other people and that actually value the safety of all Americans, not just their personal safety. So that's just some of the things that I have noticed over the years with TSA. And I thought we would discuss this one because they have so many employees, a little over 54,000, and that's as of 2020. And again, their budget is over $7 billion a year. And again, that is as of 2020. And I find that to be really ridiculous, very ridiculous. I just think it's very excessive considering what all they put Americans through. And it's just really sad because, their job is not to bother Americans or to bully Americans. It's actually to protect American citizens. See, what really sucks about 9/11 is that it was totally preventable. Totally. But it did not get prevented. So here's the thing. Whenever you have bad situations like what happened with 9/11, I know that our country had a knee-jerk reaction to it, and then that's when things just started going downhill in terms of things not being very pleasant to travel with airlines and things of that nature. And I think that's so unfortunate because it's punishing the wrong people. Americans were not the ones that perpetrated 9/11. So it's one of those things that, yes, crimes do happen. It sucks. It's awful. But we need to make sure that we hold the bad people accountable for what they did bad and not continue to punish people that had nothing to do with it. And sometimes with TSA agents, it's like they hate their job. Like, I've never seen a TSA agent that's happy or that smiles or that's very kind. They're very gruff and rough, and they yell at people, and it's just like, they're like SS officers. They're like Gestapos from the Nazis. That's what they remind me of, and I think that's very sad, because here they are supposed to protect the United States. They are supposed to protect passengers, and yet look at how they treat them. It's not always very kind. It's not always very pleasant. And I think that, hey, if you're going to do a job and do it well, you need to be respectful of who you work for and who you work with and who you are paid to protect. That's just my personal opinion. But again, I'm saying that as a Republican capitalist. So hopefully the TSA can be privatized, because I think the results would be great. But I will go ahead and end this podcast. But as usual, until next time, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much. God bless, and bye-bye.